Sure.
Okay, go.
Okay, well, as I was saying, it's just as Nevitt usually does, which is, give a basic outline and then a general question. I have one because I got the general gist of this section in the sense of its historical analysis. It's a very, very interesting historical analysis of the circumstances leading up to the Marshall Plan and after it, and where Bataille is in history. And the perspective that he has is very unique, very interesting. And I could follow it. It was clear and well written, I think, very well written. And there were certain parts of it that really puzzled me. I'll say that. And just, I guess, to kick it off, yeah, when he's talking about classical comedy, right away, I think that's the first time where I really, oh, actually, no, that's even earlier than that. No, on 171 was where I was really confused. I was very interested in what he was saying. It was on the possibility of a non-military competition between methods of production. So just, I don't know why, but I feel compelled to, give some sort of background understanding of what he's talking about. That this exorbitant production, he's talking about exorbitant production being this function in a society that tends to make that society apt for war. Or have a propensity for war and war making. If there's no, and he actually says, if there are no buyers, war will be the client. Only war can be the client of a plethoric industry. And that part I understand. He's just making a point, regarding the Soviet Union and the United States or Western powers. But before he says that, in this section, there's this big paragraph that I found really interesting, but I did not understand at all. And it was it was the second paragraph of that section. He says, but while it is the result of menace, and though it was once linked to the feeling of a useless effort, of the game already lost, the alert consciousness cannot in any way surrender to anguish. It is dominated rather by the assurance of the moment, the laughable idea that darkness alone will be the answer to the will to see. But up to the last, it will not be able to give up the tranquil pursuit of good fortune. It will give up only in the happy event of death. And then he goes on, this part also confuses me. In the situation of absolute schism, what prevents one from believing war to be inevitable is the idea that under the present conditions, the economy, to alter Clausewitz's phrase, might continue it by other means. Wait, actually, I do get that one. That he's talking about non-lethal war. But I highlighted that too. But that first part, where it's up to the point where he says it will give up only in the happy event of death. That whole thing, I found really, on 171, by the way, just to reiterate, I found that really puzzling. And I wanted to know if you guys had any thoughts on what he's talking about there. Because I know you said earlier before that, sorry, just one more point, that he said that the powerlessness of capitalist subjectivities is favorable to the birth of self-consciousness, wherein, we, capitalist subjects, in some sense, have this, this powerlessness that, which I think he's referring to when he's talking about linked to the feeling of a useless effort of the game already lost. That's what I imagined, but I don't know what that implies, I guess, for the rest of that paragraph. This feeling of powerlessness that can breed self-consciousness. The alert consciousness can not surrender away to anguish. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I also had trouble with that with that passage, and so I'm not answering your question. I'm just gonna make a comment about what he means by self-consciousness, or what I think he means by self-consciousness there, because he also mentions that somewhere in the previous page about the situation being ideal for our previous section. And because the sort of things we read and talk about and think about, my initial reading of that was like literally like self-consciousness. But then the way he uses it later, like in the passage you mentioned, he says the situation could hardly be better for awakening the mind. And so what I'm just trying to do is clarify what he means by that term. It seems to me what he means is really just kind of self-awareness of the situation we're actually in, like the stark, like this bracing awareness of, of the actual, as opposed to kind of just being buried in the sort of everyday routine. This is what we're doing, that this monumental conflict between the Soviet Union and the world kind of shocked us into awareness of the world situation. So that's in no way answers your question. I just wanted to know if if I'm correct in thinking that's what he means by awareness or self-consciousness.
Especially where Hunter read the second paragraph from that section. The alert consciousness I read is precisely that. It's it's a heightened consciousness because of the threat, the Soviet threat, or just in general the threat of war.
Yeah, to add on that, it's really because of what I was trying to follow in terms of his analysis. Remember, Hunter, you had said that war is what? How does he phrase it? It was, I don't want to say more inevitable, but it's like when you have massive production and there's other things interfering. The only possibility then is to then use war as an outlet. And since my reading of him comparing the USA to the USSR was that it's the United States that has this massive, overwhelming production, right? Later on that same page at the last paragraph, the American economy is in fact the greatest explosive mass the world has ever known. And so I thought that second paragraph, under the possibility of a non-military competition between methods of production, I thought he was saying that, maybe there would be a global nuclear war because the United States, because its production is so much larger than the Soviet Union's, might think that it could survive such a war, even if it did, blow the Soviet Union back to the Stone Age. There'd be so much extra productive capacity, that's why people were trying to whistle past the graveyard, because if his analysis is correct, right?
Well, maybe this is getting too picky, or too, trying to pick it apart too much. But like in that paragraph, the alert consciousness cannot in any way surrender to anguish. I think I understand mostly what he means by that. But the next phrase, the next thing, and then the parentheses, I just don't understand. It is dominated rather by the assurance of the moment. I don't know what he means by that. And then in parentheses, I guess. Well, anyway, the laughable idea that darkness alone will be the answer to the will to see. I just don't know what he means by those words.
I don't know. I guess I just took it from more of an absurdist understanding of the human condition, of the desire to seek meaning, but realizing that death isn't of itself an answer, being a constituent part of existence, like the lucid perspective of being human, searching for meaning, understanding that you can't really give up for the quest of some type of meaning, but realizing this is the human condition, and the laughable idea that oblivion will be some type of answer just as much as heaven would be.
Well, and look, in a fundamental sense.
You're on mute, Hunter. I'm sorry, Ed, I apologize.
Go ahead, Hunter.
I'm just seeing what Joseph is saying. No, I'm just agreeing. I see what Joseph is saying, but I was like, Ed, I thought both compelled me in the sense that I'm with Nevid. I feel like this is, I have trouble parsing what he's saying when I'm reading it, but I felt compelled by Ed's point on nuclear war as this, in the happy event of death. It made sense that this paragraph would be about large scale relationships and dynamics, this productive industry not giving up the tranquil pursuit of good. I don't know what the tranquil part means, though. That's kind of weird. But this pursuit of good fortune, and it'll give up only in the happy event of death. I thought maybe that, the only thing that'll stop this raging machine of industry is death. Or in the form of, and what I think of when I think of that is like mutually assured destruction in war. You know what I mean? Like maybe this massive, this unstoppable pursuit of good fortune will, I guess, in a sense, lead to its death. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Here's an interpretation. This is so earlier maybe last time or time before last, I can't remember which, Chase was pointing out this passage where Bataille seemed to be saying that this capitalist system tends toward nihilism and toward an embrace of nihilism, and I'm wondering if there's maybe sort of a Nietzschean thing going on here. So the alert consciousness cannot in any way surrender to anguish, and so I'm reminded of Nietzsche's comments about the will to power, at one point, the will wills against itself. In other words, the will, in a sense, seeks to annihilate itself because that's the only kind of willing it has left. So in order to save the will wills against life, just in an effort to keep willing something. And so, I'm wondering, like, the alert consciousness cannot in any way surrender to anguish. So like, this just looks terrible, but I'm still going to keep, focusing on this. The laughable idea that darkness alone will be the answer to the will to cease. So, I mean, this is similar to what Joseph was saying, but I wonder if this sort of deep nihilistic drive, maybe, that he thinks is a danger in this kind of situation. There's like no way out. And so, so there's this temptation to say, we choose annihilation because that's the only thing we have left to choose. We will it. So maybe that's like, mutual assured destruction or something. In other words, when left with no ability to do anything else, we will choose to annihilate one another. And, if that's, like, we see this with full awareness, the will to see, we understand this is where we're headed, and we choose death because that's the only thing we have left to choose. But then he says, up to the very last, like up until right before that place, it will not be able to give up the tranquil purpose of good fortune. So like, you've got this double thing going on, the whole world is driving toward annihilation. At the same time, you've got this illusion of good fortune, but then it will finally give up only in the happy event of death, when this thing sort of culminates in annihilation. So maybe that's reading too much into the text, but kind of putting together what Ed and Joseph said with, this sort of nihilism we saw earlier in the text.
The very first full sentence on the top of page 172. I mean, some of the adjective he uses. In return, the idea that enormous machinery driven by an inevitable movement of growth is viable, balanced, and rational implies all the dangers of thoughtlessness. The fact that it was discharged in two world wars is not especially reassuring. In any case, it is painful to see a dynamic society given over unreservedly and without long-range plans to the movement that propels it. It is painful to know that it is largely unacquainted with the laws of its development and that it produces without assessing the consequences of the production. It's like the capitalist economy is the hamster on the wheel and doesn't know why it keeps on running, but it's there to produce. And it doesn't even ask, well, what's going to be the consequences of all this production, right? Look at exhaust from automobiles, look at factory, look at another piece of Antarctica ice sheet has broken off. I thought that's what he was getting at there, that there's a logic of capitalism, but the people involved don't take a step back and say why.
Well, that sounds at least consistent with what I was saying, that maybe part of this logic that, when the means of production becomes so massive, and when war becomes, because in times past, war did not allow us to annihilate the entire planet, but now it does. And so maybe, I'm wondering if maybe that's part of, this thoughtlessness is this kind of weird, this sort of double consciousness of having this drive toward annihilation without really realizing that that's what we're doing, something like that. And that the capitalist economy, with throwing all this stuff into production, is now going to have this drive toward war, but war now means mutually assured destruction, whereas it didn't mean that necessarily in the past. And he does, by the way, I wanted to make a comment way back in the first chapter or the preface. he mentioned war as kind of the one of the most common outlets for the whatever that word is that I can't remember, for excessive production. So I don't think that this is an isolated case. I think he thinks this is a very common way that excess production is dispensed with, is in war.
Yes, I would say, but with a different kind of consciousness beforehand, right? With this particular historical situation. I was going to point out the passage that Ed just read there at the top of 172. I'm glad he read that out, because to me it helps explain, partially the paragraph that Hunter pointed out at the, in 171, the dominated by the assurance of the moment, right? Is to me, it speaks precisely to that lack of a long-term plan and that thoughtlessness. And it's part of the same section. Up to the last one, not be able to give up the tranquil pursuit of good fortune. Again, in the moment, just driving towards a profit motive, from the perspective of the individual, right?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say, I agree with Eric, and it made me think that it made me think that this pursuit of good fortune is part of, and Nevin, what you also made me think is that this because I didn't know that, or I didn't, it's not that I didn't know, but I didn't think about the tendency towards nihilism that Bataille kind of lays out as being a symptom or an aspect of capital. But I think another thing, at least to me, what it seems like a possible reading, I don't know if this is right, but a possible reading of that sentence would be that it's a nihilism, and basically, like Eric is saying, almost like a skepticism, like just a skepticism, and like a commitment to what some people would say, like, or like sophistry almost, you know what I mean? Like just whatever's good, the idea that darkness alone will be the answer to the will to see. You try to see, you're just going to get darkness. What's the point? I don't care. I don't care about that stuff. I need to focus on getting peace of mind, the tranquil pursuit of I just want peace of mind. Honestly, I don't care what's out there. I just want to chill out. It's the slave morality. It's like I would prefer to do that, and they will seek good fortune, and then the happy event of death is like a relief. It's like, oh my God, okay, I can quit all this rat race for peace of mind. Now I'm dead, or I'm dying. And that's a possible, but I think maybe banal. I don't know, but that reading of that paragraph.
To complement that too, I wanted to say I detected Durkheim in the background as well, which fits with the.
I don't know Dirk. You said Durkheim?
Durkheim, yeah.
I know just a tiny bit about Durkheim, so that would, if you could explain.
Like he's made, like, one of the concepts associated with him is anomie, right? Just the loss. It's part of the crisis of modernity, the loss of meaning, but from the perspective of the individual subject. And it was born from his study in the late 19th century, noticing that using empirical data, he was one of the positivist sociologists, and he was able to parse out that there was an increasing rate of suicide. Just as like industry was growing in France and people were able to meet their most basic needs at an increased rate. I mean, I'm not saying that they got rid of poverty, but they were at least industrially able to start to ameliorate poverty. But we have more people killing themselves. So how do you explain that, right? And he goes into the whole the loss of almost like that, the nihilism, death of God. Enemy is one of the complementary concepts.
And Ed was mentioning sort of contemporary manifestations. What Eric and Hunter were talking about, like the whole business about the climate crisis, and well, yeah, but how can you worry about that when we have to make a profit? I mean, you can't burden all these industries with these regulations, because that's going to reduce productivity. It's gonna, and all, so there's all these business concerns, and there's people like, yeah, but we're all gonna die. And they're like, well, maybe, someday. Right now, what we really need to worry about is the shareholders.
Yeah, I'd really like to at some point recommend in the literature group reading The Death of Ivan Ilyich, because this whole reading reminded me of that short story quite passionately, in regards to how, like, I, I won't go into that. That's a different topic, and I'm getting tangential. But I do think there is something to be said about the aspect of the deconstructive nihilism and constructive nihilism, because there is an intimacy involved when it becomes the persecutor and the persecutee. Or even on 170, he says something along the lines of that intimacy where apparently world domination would then belong to the single holder of the decisive weapons, but in the way that the victim belongs to the executioner. The executioner's burden is so inevitable that the awareness that such a bloody solution would certainly poison social life is so strong that there does not exist on the American side any substantial option in favor of war in the near future. I found it really fascinating, not only that it leads to the conclusion that there is some type of cyclical aspect of creating values with a Nietzschean-like influence. I did get quite a bit of an absurdism-like influence on 171 from the other passage I read. But did anybody else, and I don't know my history very well, pick up on the Cold War prediction that he made, not only in these statements, but later on in the text? Okay, because that's what I have, Cold War notes everywhere. So, and this was before the Cold War, right? He wrote before the Cold War.
Oh no, if he's already talking about the Marshall Plan, he would be writing during it.
During, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, because most people kind of date the Cold War from Truman's statement, the Truman Doctrine. We have to oppose, help free peoples in their fight for freedom. And that was March of 1947. And then the Marshall Plan law was passed in the late winter, early spring of 1948.
That's okay. Thank you very much. Because I was curious about that. And it does lead in a way back to his aspect of sacrifice, right? I just was thinking about this while talking. The conflection of wills, the power of wills, the executioner and the victim building up one structure of values next to another. Those who give into the executioner are kind of in a way sacrificing themselves to the aspect of whatever values that system creates. So maybe what he's saying in a way is that when you have a system that it champions the use of waste in a way that kind of promotes itself, you are performing a sacrifice. You do have this excess of energy in the whole system, and you are sacrificing yourself by merely engaging in capitalism. I don't know. I'll have to build on that. I'm not sure.
Well, I'll talk about something that Ed knows a whole hell of a lot more than I do. I was actually unfamiliar with Bretton Woods, embarrassingly. So I went and just, spent a few minutes reading up on that. I thought it's helpful. I just read enough to understand what his comparison between Bretton Woods and the Marshall Plan. And correct me, Ed, if I'm wrong, but my understanding of the difference is that Bretton Woods was apparently when the IMF was developed, the World Bank, and it was an effort to stabilize the world economic system by having one currency that the whole world could have as a privileged currency, which for a long time was the dollar. But his comment seems to be that whole effort to stabilize the world economy was based on, he says this at the bottom of 175 on the rules of a classical economy. So it still treated people or groups and people as individuals with their individual interests, and the primary purpose was still profit. And so it was a sort of the classical capitalist model, whereas at least the way he characterizes it, and I didn't read much about the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan was really about just basically giving stuff away to these damaged economies after World War II so that they could begin to participate in the economy. So giving stuff away, I mean, not in a completely unself-centered way, but what the idea is, we're not going to have a market for our products if these other economies continue. So Bretton Woods was not helping lift these damaged economies. And so the Marshall Plan was saying, well, let's just throw a whole lot of resources and money out there and hope that some of these economies will get back into gear so we can have a place to sell our products to. And is that right? Is that consistent, Ed, with your understanding of the difference between those two?
I would be a little bit less cynical about the motives for the Marshall Plan, but I found it remarkable that Bataille realized that Bretton Woods, as it was originally created, didn't work as planned, because everybody on both sides of the Atlantic, 1945, 44, 45, 46, thought Europe doesn't need a lot, but it needs it now. And so that the World Bank and the IMF would provide the liquidity, the capital necessary to invest in the different European economies to, reestablish transportation, dredge ports, let's get, the farms back working again. And by 1947, 48, it was obvious Europe wasn't growing. And think of Bretton Woods as a plumbing system, a really great plumbing system that unfortunately lacks water. And the Marshall Plan is the water. There is such a $17 billion flowing through Bretton Woods because the United States made a unilateral promise in Bretton Woods to exchange 1 ounce of gold for every $35 given to it. And all the countries who signed off on it promised to maintain, what's the word I want to use? Convertibility. They would convert each other's currency, and that they would keep their currencies fixed. They would be by government decree the value of their currencies within 1% plus or minus of parity. And so there was the United States was the only country that had been able to provide the capital to both the World Bank and IMF by 1948. Britain and France, other countries had not contributed a franc to it. And so with the Marshall Plan money just flooding, and that's what's weird about when you talk about capital, the capital part of capitalism, it just lends itself to vocabulary that's usually associated with fluids, with water, liquidity, capital flows, capital droughts. And and then you had sustained economic growth. And the Marshall Plan law also required the European countries to cooperate with each other. They just couldn't create these autonomous new post-war economies, but they actually had to have in their national plans some kind of sense of trading with each other and getting goods from each other. And so some economists will say Marshall Plan actually saved Bretton Woods, but it also helped create the conditions for the common market, the European common market, the European Union.
I feel a little bad for jumping so far ahead. I get just somebody said something that made me think of Bretton Woods. So.
No, he does mention it, and also I was very surprised when he realized, it didn't work as originally planned, because for a lot of people they say, Bretton Woods, but they really ignore how Marshall Plan and then actually even NATO expenditures, U.S. NATO expenditures in Europe also put more money into the European economies.
I think one of the kind of one of the weird parts about it, I guess, yes, this is a long tradition that or a long history of relations between governing bodies and financially interested parties in geopolitical relations. This is a long-standing history that has developed to this point of the Marshall Plan. So it's not necessarily completely novel, but I think there's something interesting about it that Bataille is pointing to. And the way that I could kind of get at it, I guess, would be that Eric in the chat talked about an idea. I don't remember for what part of the book, but I remember this in an earlier chapter, there was this discussion about capitalism typically redirecting excess energy and resources back into the system to develop productive capacity, right? I'm reading that directly from what Eric posted in the chat, and I agree. I think Marx in Volume 1 of Capital, which I have read, which is, it's not exactly a page turner in my opinion, but I did do it. And this was a thing he talked about, was he said that he gives this description of what capitalists tend to do with the acquired value from their employment of labor. The value, the excess value that they acquire, like that they extract, the excess value that they extract or exploit out of labor is then employed by them in a series of different ways. One of them being the investment into more labor, more living labor, and more dead labor, which is machines. And the investment in one's storehouses and factory buildings and resources and paying off judges and further and further investment, right, to continue the flow at a greater and greater rate for the individual. And I think Bataille is saying that the Marshall Plan is kind of an example of that use of that excess value, right? That excess value. It's an example of that same sort of operation that Marx describes, this investment in maintaining production, but it being employed in the interest of preserving competition, which I think is what is so interesting to him when he brings up this notion of general interest. And that's what he's opposing to the classical economy, the Bretton Woods stuff, you know what I mean? And that's, I don't know, that I think is interesting. What I'm more interested in, unfortunately, is the next section, which is where he goes from general interest to finally the general economy. And we get some more details about that, because I'm very curious at this point, but I don't know. Yeah, that's all.
A question I have, in regard to that capitalism pouring all of its resources back into production, is, he seems to think that war is, I get the impression he thinks it's not inevitable, because later he talks about there being other options, but it seems to be the most common way to deal with an excess. And it seems to be his thesis here, and also way back at the beginning of the book, was that if you keep pouring resources back into the system in order to grow the system and increase productive capacity, at some point it doesn't work anymore. Like there's just too many resources, and you've got to do something with it. And the most common thing to do with it is wage war. And I guess, again, is that correct, that's what he's saying? And then why is it that, or maybe he's just making an observation, maybe he's not trying to give us an explanation why. I'm just curious as to why is it that war seems to be the most, again, I was tempted to say inevitable, but given that the later on he says, well, we could redirect these resources elsewhere. Why is it that war is the most common way that we get rid? And because from what I gather earlier in the book, it's not just capitalist societies, but when societies can no longer get rid of all this stuff, they just tend to go wage wars. Actually, though, in some sense, war is necessary, because then I was just looking at the bottom of 172. if war is necessary to the American economy, it does not follow that war has to hold the traditional form. So it does sound like he thinks that, at least, and now maybe here he's talking just about capitalism, but that he does seem to think that war is inevitable. It's just the form of war maybe can be different. And what that made me think of is what the West is doing to Russia right now. I heard a podcast, I can't remember, Ezra Klein or someone, and this guy that he had on said, you need to realize that what we're doing right now is we are engaged in a war. It really is a war. I mean, the West, not just Ukraine and Russia, but the entire West is waging a war against Russia. It's economic warfare, but it's still war. And the reason, his justification for saying that, and he said, you've seen this at various points throughout human history, but because of the devastation that it is bringing to the Russian people, is, you don't have the bombs and the destruction, but you're going to have starvation, and you're going to have homelessness, and you're going to have a lot of the effects that would have been produced in a physical war, but they're generated by economic means rather than by, the instruments of war. And that sounds exactly like, to me, that sounded like a perfect case in point of what he's talking about. But I guess, one question I've got is why is it, in general, or for capitalism in particular, why does he think that war is basically necessary when you can't get rid of all of this stuff?
Oh, I want to say the most direct answer to that question would be in imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, but it's been a while since I've read that, so I'm not going to try to reproduce it.
Well, think of it this way. You know how people make a comparison between what's the cost of a battleship? I'm thinking, what's the cost of a tank? How many school lunches can that cover if we didn't buy an additional tank? How much? What about healthcare? Right? What about doing a better job with the care of older people? And when you think about it, war machines are usually capital intensive and a lot of profit. And who's not going to say, of course, we need this because we're defending our country, and wave the flag? And since the government has a perpetual source of income, us, taxes, then it's a reliable way of priming the pump.
Pretty much a guaranteed buyer.
Yeah.
So it basically is just a really effective mechanism for absorbing excess capital, both politically and socially and economically. It's just a really effective means.
And providing jobs.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or as a racket.
Go ahead.
I was just giving a real specific. Do you ever hear of the Bendix Corporation? I usually Bendix does between 90 and 100% of its business with the U.S. government, and there are major corporations like that.
I was just going to use the West's economic sanctions against Russia to kind of talk about this. I have never seen such a graphic example in my life. When I read that, that's exactly what I thought of. And, it seems like the parallel is pretty close because, if you look at what sanctions against Russia are, I'm not saying they're good or bad, but I'm just saying that it's a really good, I think, a good example of waging war by economic means, because it is in fact going to get rid of some capital in the West, because we're paying higher fuel prices. We're going to have to pay higher food prices. If Europe Europe refuses to get gas from Russia, that is going to kill them, because most of their gas, they get most of their oil from Russia, but their gas is what keeps their factories running. It's what keeps their homes heated. And they get, I don't know what percentage, but a huge percentage of their gas from Russia. And so if these sanctions really do continue in this direction, it is going to cause real economic hardship on the West. more Europe than America, but even in America. And so it does serve that same function of, of consuming excess productivity.
This might be an overly simplistic analogy, but the first thing that came to my mind was the game Risk. Like how when you start playing the game Risk and you get more land, you get more armies. Nowhere does that land lead to production or food or schools or anything useful, but the land produces more armies. So maybe in a way it's very similar to what you're talking about in regards to the military industrial complex, and what Bataille is saying about expenditure is that the system is organic, starts growing to the point where it becomes a military industrial complex, and its consumption of the resources of land, it's exceeded its capacity beyond anything else, and it is consuming and using more excess, and just becomes this own kind of disgusting joined together pipe of flesh without any real useful expenditure of the resources that it's consuming. It's just growing itself.
So, I'm sorry I keep harping on this, but this makes me wonder what economic warfare, what advantage is there? So over regular warfare, I guess less direct death, maybe more indirect death. Because if you look at the bottom of 172, a conflict is not necessarily military. One can envisage a vast economic competition which for the competitor with the initiative would cost sacrifices comparable to those of war, and which from a budget of the same scale as war budgets would involve expenditures that would not be compensated by any hope of capitalist profit. I mean, what this reminds me of is the original Star Trek. There was this episode where there was this planet where, you remember that, think of that too, Ed, where there were these two powers that were at war. And because they didn't want to have to deal with all the destructive capacity of actual weapons, what they did is they had this simulation running, and the simulation would determine, who won what battles on what day. And then when one, like if this particular community, according to the simulation, was destroyed, then all of the people in that literal actual community would go to this execution site, and they would go into this machine and they would be vaporized. And so it was a way of destroying people without having to destroy, the means of production, and without having to destroy infrastructure and real capital and stuff like that. And so, I mean, that almost sounds like what he's saying, because he says it would cost sacrifices comparable to those of war. I mean, if he really means that, and again, this one person that I think Ezra Klein was interviewing was saying the hardships on the Russian people, and you talk about like the effect of the sanctions on Iran and things of that sort. I mean, they caused real devastation to the people. And a lot of people say they didn't. One reason they're trying to hammer on the oligarchs in Russia is try to make the wealthy feel the pinch as well, not just the common people. But that doesn't work so well. I mean, the oligarchs, well, I don't know, maybe it will work better this time since they're shutting down all their bank assets and stuff. But as a rule, these kinds of economic sanctions, they just beat the shit out of the people in the nation and don't do that much to the power elite.
Look at Cuba. And again, Iran's mullahs are more, they're in a stronger position precisely because they've been isolated and threatened economically.
So I guess, it's the economic warfare is like the neutron bomb. For those you are old enough to remember that, which is probably just me and Ed, the neutron bomb was supposed to be able to kill all the people, but leave the infrastructure standing, because it just and I think they actually exist. I don't know that anyone's ever deployed one, or at least they know how to build them. But what they do is they're high yield neutron generators, and they literally shoot high energy neutrons out, which tend to go through the physical things, but they just, rip the shit out of the human bodies on a molecular scale. And so it was a way of killing the people without damaging the infrastructure. And that sounds like what the way he's describing economic warfare.
Okay, well then, my question, I guess, my next thought is the Marshall Plan an act of economic warfare or a part of the economic warfare? A competition between the United States and the Soviet Union, or is the Marshall Plan some sort of subversion of this momentarily? What do you think? What do you guys think?
So I saw an interesting inversion. You were like earlier with the chapter on Soviet industrialization, right? He was kind of pointing out the irony that the Marxist dream was to redistribute the excess energy and resources to make sure that the poor were fed and housed and and everybody was economically equal. Only when they took over in Russia, they couldn't do that because of their backward economic situation, and they did exactly what the capitalists were doing just so they could keep up or catch up. Right. And we talked about how they may or may not have been vindicated by World War II. But, they did the opposite of what they wanted to do. Right. They were forced to do the opposite of what they wanted to do, what was in their plan. And the way I read, Bataille discussing the Marshall Plan here, it ends up being kind of like an international from each according to his ability and to each according to their need. So it's an inversion, right? It's like internationally, this capitalist powerhouse, is now adopted this, communist moral position, right? So it's the same kind of inversion, but from the other direction. I read that as one element of what he's doing in this chapter. What was it else? Oh, I also was wondering if it isn't also kind of international potlatch.
I mean, it was certainly, I don't know, Hunter, if I'd call it, when I think of economic warfare, I think of when a country imposes negative sanctions, and they're either usually two categories: we trade and finance, right? So you freeze assets, you stop giving loans, and you talk to banks not to give loans to a country, and then you boycott and embargo, all that kind of stuff. With the Marshall Plan, it obviously was the United States did it because of the fear of Soviet domination of Europe, but it was to all the countries who were open to receiving it. In fact, there were, the rationale was, destruction of World War II. Well, are you going to tell an Irish American politician from Chicago that Ireland's not getting this aid? And so Ireland and Sweden, never involved in World War II, in war, they received some Marshall Plan money. And so it was certainly economic statecraft, but I don't think I'd call it economic warfare. And and you could see it as enlightened self-interest, that obviously Europe, at least in the beginning, was going to buy goods from the United States. But trust me, there were, I would be, we forget his name, but Robert Taft, a senator from Ohio, an isolationist, the son of William Howard Taft, the president, voted against NATO. He was one of like 12 to 14 senators who voted against NATO. So, in retrospect, we think, it's a slam dunk, and the United States knew it was going to get its money back. But there were people who said, I'm not so sure about this. But it did pass by pretty substantial. But there were still people who thought it was it was their fear of the Soviet Union that pushed them over the finish line for the Marshall Plan.
I was gone for a few minutes. I apologize. So maybe Ed answered this question, but with regard to Hunter's question, again, I don't know much about the Marshall Plan. I didn't read much about it. So did the Marshall Plan, was the Marshall Plan in support of Western nations? Probably exclusively, I would guess. It probably didn't provide any resources to China or Russia. Is that correct?
Well, actually, ironically, though, there wasn't a list of countries, and it was confined to Europe. And I mean, Soviet Union could have killed it if it said, yeah, we want in. And then I can't imagine the US Congress saying, oh yeah, we'll do this. And in fact, there were delegates to some of the early meetings from Poland and Czechoslovakia. And it was actually Stalin who told them, what are you doing? Get out of there. Go back home. I didn't tell you you could go and talk to them about it. So it went as far east as Sweden and Scandinavia and Denmark and down to Italy in the Mediterranean. Yeah. And then the Iberian Peninsula and the United Kingdom and Ireland. And then most of Europe. And remember, Germany at that time was not, Germany became eligible for it when the three Western zones were united into West Germany, the Federal Republic, in 1949.
Well, to Hunter's point, maybe, I mean, I agree. I tend to think of economic warfare as involving sanctions, sort of like, again, what we're doing to Russia. But at the bottom of 172, Bataille at least mentions economic competition. He says a conflict is not necessarily military. One can envisage a vast economic competition, which for the competitor with the initiative would cost sacrifices comparable to those of war. So I don't know exactly, he doesn't give us much detail, but it seems at least possible that he might be thinking of warfare as including that warfare might include economic competition, but that could be so devastating that it could still drive, one side into economic ruin. You think about like for example, Microsoft and other companies buying up these small companies, sort of predatory practices where they go and they find out that some company is doing something that competes with them, and so they just buy them out and then destroy them, or just buy them out and absorb them. That's maybe Bataille would call even that economic warfare.
Nevin, an example of what you just said. There was a company that was for landscaping. It provided all organic fertilizers, and the Scott company bought the company. It was a private company, and then instead of saying, "Well, hey, this is an alternative. Let people buy the stuff they want," just said, "No." The Scott company closed down all the production.
Yeah, and there's these persistent rumors, maybe they're just conspiracy theories, I don't know, but these persistent rumors about oil companies buying up small startups that had, long time ago, that had alternative means for vehicles, electric or whatever, various technologies. And these oil companies would just buy them out and then just squash them.
One of my stepdad's cousins got a big check from an oil company when he patented a carburetor that got very good mileage to the gallon. They bought that patent off of him so that they could make sure it wasn't developed. I want to say that was in the 70s or the 80s.
So I'm happy for anyone else to talk. No one else is talking, so I still have comments and questions.
Well, please. I guess my thinking right now, the only thing I'm thinking about right now is that is it, in a sense, I mean, it's this, I don't, maybe it's not economic warfare, but that sort of action against, your buyers, that sort of activity I think that's actually in Marx too. Now he talks about a tendency for capitalists to basically, he says, cut themselves off at the feet, where like an example would be I run a shoe factory, and all my employees also happen to really live in the town where my shoe factory is. My shoe factory moves these shoes right to the shoe store right next door, and they all buy the shoes at the shoe store. And so they're all wearing the shoes they make at the factory. With the money that I pay them, because they need my money to buy things like my shoes that I sell. But then I find out that 3,000 miles westward is like I can get the same, the shoes can be made and then transported here for 1/10 of the cost. So I do that because it's the cheapest thing to do. It's the best way to assure myself a profit margin. And then the shoes get here to the shoe store and nobody wants to buy them suddenly because they don't have any money. They can't buy my shoes. I mean, that would just be like, maybe I pay them less, you know what I mean? But maybe that happens, oh no, they can't buy the products I'm selling because I'm paying them so little. Lots of ways this could occur. But do you think this in any way, I mean, that seems, I guess, I don't know, maybe it's like economic barbarism or something. I don't know, but that sort of isolated interest of the individuals in charge of the managing the market that they inhabit or operate in as a financial entity, like that just seems I was going to say initially, I was like, is there some tendency of economic warfare to unfold, or something like it to unfold relatively generally in capitalism? And this made me think of Marx has a quote about capitalists. He says they're a band of warring brothers, which I think is fun. But yeah, that's it.
So here's this is right before the Marshall Plan on page 173. This sounds like this actually answers Hunter's question from Bataille's perspective. This is like the last 3 or 4 sentences. The Marshall Plan offers an organization of surplus against the accumulation of the Stalin plans. This does not necessarily imply armed struggle, which cannot lead to a real decision. If the opposed forces are different in nature economically, they must enter into competition on the plane of economic organization. This is what the Marshall Plan accomplishes, it would seem, as the West's only reaction to the movement of the Soviets in the world. Actually, in the sentence I skipped, the Marshall Plan succeeds in giving a clear focus to the current conflict. It is not essentially the struggle of 2 military powers for hegemony. It is the struggle of 2 economic methods. So that sounds like he does see the Marshall Plan as a form of economic warfare. So if this is right, Bataille, it seems to, maybe I'm, again, I haven't read the rest of the chapter, so maybe it resolves some other way, but there does seem to be something like a dark view here that some sort of war is inevitable, and the only thing you can do is determine what kind of war. I'm reminded of in the Republic, Plato or Socrates gives this argument for why war is inevitable. And in his case, it's because of restricted resources. We have limited resources and we have these expansive desires that we always want more than we have. And so that's always going to generate war. But it sounds like, to me, it sounds like he's saying warfare of some kind is inevitable. Maybe that's what it's starting to sound like. If it's not physical warfare, at least economic warfare.
Yeah, the picture he paints of the classical economy does sound rather Hobbesian, doesn't it?
But the weird thing, and again, maybe this is going to get resolved in the rest of the book. Who do we just lose?
Hunter,
he put in the chat he has to go.
Oh, that's right. Oh God, what was I going to say? Oh, that he describes seems to me capitalism in a sort of Hobbesian fashion, which seems consistent with his derivation of capitalism through Lutheranism and Calvinism and this hyper-individualism, and it's all about the individual and individual rights and all that kind of stuff. But and then the Marshall Plan, as Hunt or someone maybe it was Eric Riley pointed out, you know, it has this communist ethos to it, you know, from each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. But then that system is in conflict with the Soviets. And so it's like, you know, you might be able to figure out a way to overcome the tendency toward war within some limited scope, but then it sounds like he thinks there's always going to be these, I don't know what to say, competing movements or something that, I don't know. And maybe it's unfair. I can't tell to what degree he's saying this is inevitable, and to what degree he's saying this is just what's happened under these conditions in the present world. But on the other hand, you know, if you look this whole historical study he's done, it just keeps happening over and over and over. So it makes me think that maybe he's just saying, and this is how it's happening now, and here's about the best we can do in the present moment. So it still seems pretty dark.
I did read ahead, and I want to say he does kind of qualify that a bit, though. You know what I mean? You know, and I don't want to discuss that until next week, but yeah, he does. It did remind me much of Hegel, the last few pages.
So it looks like Chase's cat has released him to.
Yeah, he was on my lap, so I was laying down, taking a nap, and of course my cat joined me. But so I got up, but then I just felt tired again, so I laid back down, and he got back on me. So I just now I did kind of force him off. Yeah, a little bit. Well, okay. We've got a good kind of telepathic connection. So all I have to do is kind of like move in a certain way, like tense my muscles, like I'm going to get up, and then he instantly knows to like jump off me. It's yeah, connected.
Doesn't that undercut your earlier argument that you were incapacitated and couldn't bring your face to the camera because you had a cat on top of you?
Oh yeah, somewhat, yeah. I mean, that was true for the moment, but then I had the opportunity to go back to basically do what I'm doing now, but instead I chose to go back and lay on my bed and get my cat on me, and I think it was something about the comfort. You know, it's kind of womb-like. You know, I don't know. Yeah, this has nothing to do with Bataille, does it? Oh well, whatever. Yeah, okay, so my take on the reading, I don't know, it was hard to get into it. It seems kind of, it's overly empirical in a kind of like a social science kind of way. At least for me, this is definitely kind of according to my taste, I think, because I'm just so used to very theoretical, very much philosophical thinking, that if it's not some kind of like a pure philosophy, it's like I don't know what to do with it in a way, or I'm just kind of like, okay, but what's the philosophical point? I really wish he had some more kind of theoretical aspects kind of really fleshed out, along with these empirical, this data, this historical kind of stuff, because it seems it's the way that those need to be tied together. It seems like there needs to be more emphasis on exactly how his theory that he talks about, you know, in the first 2 chapters or so, how it really ties in specifically with those examples. He seems to kind of present the examples, sort of allude to his earlier ideas, but it seems like mainly we're just kind of guessing to see, you know, how does this connect with the general economy? Like, it'd be nice if you told us, Bataille. So I don't know. I think it's, you know, it's a short book. It seems like this book should have been more detailed and longer in order to really explain what he's talking about. I don't think I have any fault necessarily with, you know, anything specific he's saying. Probably because I just don't, because I don't have the knowledge to do that, frankly. But yeah, that's kind of my take, I guess, really almost on the whole book. I really wish there was just more detailed just mediation between the theoretical and the specific kind of economic historical stuff, because okay, so this book was written in 1949, and you can tell a lot of it is very particular to 1949, and some of it seems almost ridiculous, you know, today from our perspective, of course, because you can't see the future. But other aspects are very, I think he's very much spot on in terms of predicting a lot. But yeah, so one thing, I think just the fact that, you know, a lot of stuff of the Soviet Union, the way that the Soviet Union has fallen, and there's no more, well, I guess maybe there's something kind of like a new Cold War. But in terms of Soviets versus, you know, capitalist West, that is, he sees it as, you know, almost like the Soviets are going to win because they have, you know, this indomitable will and whatnot. And that just seems, I don't know, it's hard to take that seriously, and that he's writing from that perspective. Yeah, it seems strange and dated, I guess, on that, at least on that level, although other aspects I think are still very relevant and interesting. Just the whole perspective of, you know, so in this reading, the part that he was talking about with individual profit motive, that's obviously very relevant today. But I think that's the thing he so, I mean, hindsight is 2020, but that's what is the indomitable will that he could have seen as, okay, that aspect, and not really the Marshall Plan, at least in the way that he's characterizing it as a kind of, you know, international kind of cooperation, something almost like this kind of altruistic act for Europe, I guess. Something that goes against the individual profit margin. That's what's been almost eliminated today. And maybe you could, you know, since people were talking about Marx earlier, you know, there's the whole idea of, what is it, the profit margin kind of slowly decreasing as time goes along. So it becomes where there's not as many variables that you could kind of mess around with in order to make profit because of competition, so that everyone is kind of just stuck with like some basic algorithms that they can do in order to make profit. And if you do something outside of those axioms, that isn't for, you know, sheer profit, usually short-term profit, by the quarter, you know, stock market, then yeah, that's what it's called, a tendency for the rate of profit default. Yeah, thank you. I don't know why I remember that. But yeah, that I think if he examined this from that perspective a little more, I think I would think it a little more relevant to kind of at least the things that I'm trying to think of, in terms of, okay, we've got philosophy, we've got history, or we've got, theory, thinking about these things, but then also trying to use philosophy for some kind of practical application in our actual lives. And that's where I think something, I don't know, the way he talks about stuff, I think it's hard to make that connection. I think it would require somebody to kind of almost spell it out for me, how Bataille does help. But yeah, I'll preface that, or I'll end that by saying this is, of course, just kind of my opinion in a kind of flippant way. But yeah.
No, Chase. I mean, I do understand. I mean, I do understand where you're coming from, because, I mean, if you look at the productive capability of the United States in the late 40s compared to the Soviet Union, and just resource endowments, and all that, it might be that, well, of course, United States, it was inevitable. But I don't know if you ever heard of a historian by the name of Geoffrey Barraclough, who was a very well-respected historian, and he was a little bit odd in that he really was looking at the 20th century. He was British, and usually the British will say you can't have in your history department something that happened any closer than 50 years ago. But he published a short book called An Introduction to Contemporary History, and he was trying to argue that we really have to talk about something that's after modern history, that something else is going on here. And so he identified, I don't know, about a half a dozen characteristics of what he called the contemporary world. And one of it was the Soviet Union's example. And I think he called it in terms of like a theoretical and practical threat to the West. And he was being more neutral about it. He wasn't a Western Alliance cheerleader. He was just saying that the Soviet Union, going back to Lenin, has been a constant presence that is an alternative to, the main processes. And so there were people all across the spectrum who said there is always going to be a Soviet Union. That's just a part of world history now, right? And I mean, if when I came for my interview here in the spring of 1990, if I said, "Oh, within 2 years there won't be a Soviet Union," I wouldn't have gotten the job. They would have said, "You're a really interesting dude, but like you're crazy. We can't hire you." And one other thing, I want to put it, begging your pardon, into a historical context. The Soviet Union achieved so much prestige by the end of World War II because the Red Army had stopped 80% of the German army and had pushed it back to Berlin. So, when you think of the freeing of, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland from the Nazi oppression, it was part of the international coalition with Britain and the United States. And also, people really didn't know the full extent of Stalin, with the purges and everything. And so I apologize. There's like a fly got in and decided it wants to fly in between me and the screen. But when you look at all those things together, Chase, I think where Bataille is coming from, if he really was writing this, most of it in the late 1940s, the way he's talking is, I would hope what I gave you is give you more an understandable context for where he's coming from.
Yeah, so I also kind of give Chase that, like, it's sometimes kind of confusing about, where his philosophy goes with his like empirical data. But it's kind of like he does bring it up a lot, but it's just so fragmented. It's kind of confusing. Like he'll be like, he'll say the will to see or the tigers. It's like the tiger in space, but then never really defines what those mean. You're kind of like he expects you to know what those mean. Like it would be kind of almost helpful if you'd included like a lexicon of all his favorite phrases in it, so you'd have some idea what he means. You know, also I bring up, but with like the Soviet Union, like seeing as like go to history class, like they usually tell it like as soon as the like the Berlin Wall was going down, like everyone was like knew the Soviet Union was dead. That's how like history teachers you talk. If I'm wondering, when I was watching like movies from like '89 and '90, it didn't seem at all like that's what Americans thought. Because all the movies they were always showing, like a lot of the movies were like a package, like that one, it was an action movie. Like people, Americans were kind of like sort of trying to redeem the Soviet Union now that because America's spent last 50 years, showing it as, evil empire. Now they're trying to, well, it's going to be there, it's not good, but maybe it's not so bad. Maybe it's actually kind of a lot like us. Maybe we should be, because people thought, Berlin Wall wasn't going to necessarily destroy the Soviet Union, but it might finally unite the East and West, bring them together. I thought that was interesting when I watched those type of movies.
That kind of makes me think about the whole kind of ambiguity going on now. So I was thinking, okay, on one level it seems dated to think of, this kind of mighty Soviet force when it doesn't exist anymore in a sense, but in another sense, still Russia is this force in the world, and also there's China, who is at least nominally communist. I believe they are. Where there's a whole kind of ambiguity going on there that okay, so you got China, who is essentially they're some kind of capitalist country that is in name communist, or a kind of in terms of its state organization. I think it likes to use some of the communist aspects there, the kind of top down organization, but that's I think that in a way is still relevant to kind of maybe not exactly to what's going on exactly with what Bataille is talking about, but it's still relevant in the sense that there's economic warfare going on. There's these economic flows, and we're kind of stuck in the middle in trying to interpret things in terms of ideology, but perhaps really it's kind of more of a material, almost energetic dynamics kind of going on, and that our ways of trying to understand it in terms of ideas are probably bound to fail. I don't know. Or would Bataille even agree with that? I don't know. Probably not.
I'm with Eric. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I think later in the text, which we'll probably be discussing next week, he's kind of building off that chase. Like there's this individual perception of the system that we have from isolated events that needs to be moved over into the general perception of the system as a whole, which offer his own insights, which is why I think he always does these metaphors and poetic imageries and using the materialism aspect from a material and generalized observation as well.
And one other thing we didn't realize at the time, President George H.W. Bush was actually trying to keep the Soviet Union together. He was very concerned that if it broke apart, there would now then be not one country, but 4 countries with nuclear capability, and that maybe they, with the economic dislocation, might be, looking to sell a few nuclear weapons to someone who might want to buy him. So the person who actually did more to undermine the old Soviet Union wasn't Bush. It was the then Communist Party head of Ukraine, ironically enough. I mean, he was, I don't remember his name, but he literally was the communist, he was the Secretary General of the Ukrainian Communist Party. He was the head of the Ukrainian SSR. And he met with Yeltsin and then the head of the Belarus. And Gorbachev got wind of it and called up Yeltsin and said, you stabbed our country in the back. You know, what were you doing meeting with those two? And within a matter of, I don't know, days, Gorbachev resigns and there's no Soviet Union.
You know, I don't know that history having departed from Bataille's apparent predictions necessarily works against his thesis, because there's a whole lot of contingencies involved. And, you know, so it's possible, and I haven't thought about it enough to confirm or disconfirm, but it's possible that the trajectory of history actually fits as much with his general thesis as does what he was predicting. You know, and then it's just a matter of contingent factors that happen to push events one way or the other way as to why it happened this way. But his general notion of the general economy and the tendency towards war and all that kind of stuff may still hold.
Yeah, what you said, Nevin, reminded me of Trotsky made an observation saying something like the laws of economic development under Marxism or whatever didn't account for, me getting malaria and Lenin, dying of a stroke at a relatively young age. And I'm not being facetious, but imagine Lenin is functioning, doesn't die in early 1924, but lives to 1928, and he's still the head of the country, and he's able to remove Stalin as Secretary General of the Communist Party. And remember, Chase, the whole Bolshevik position was, yeah, there's laws of development, but hey, we're Bolsheviks. We can give history a push.
I guess that's another kind of tension going on. So one thing I would say is, so I didn't mean to necessarily imply that, Bataille, his analysis kind of can be valued based off, whether it's predictive or not. I think maybe to a certain degree that's true, but in a way, I think the fact that question kind of comes up, I don't know, maybe I'm just kind of something of a hoity-toity philosophical purist now or something, because I mean, I have been reading some Kant, and it's like the hatred of, the merely empirical. I think there's something like that that's kind of seeped into me, where I'm just kind of like, oh, okay, data, whoop-de-doo, give me some like transcendental thought, that's what I need. But yeah, I think history is definitely contingent in a lot of ways, and that makes it where, how do we predict that? It's so difficult to do anything like that I, even something like a historian or somebody who are the people that predict things now. We don't really have a tarot reader. I don't know. Okay, if there's a futurist who predicts something, maybe they will be judged based off of their predictions. Is there that's essentially the name of the game, I think, for something like that. But almost everyone else, usually that's not going to be the case. Yes, The Simpsons, you're right. Actually, it is something kind of like, it's almost science fiction, I think, is probably one of those things where you look at it like, holy shit, they predicted that. But sometimes it's the exact causal nature of it is a little complex, in that you're not so sure if it's just simply a kind of exterior prediction. A lot of science fiction really kind of helps bring it about. It's a hyperstition, as the accelerationists like to talk about, an idea that creates itself. Yeah, maybe I had a point there. I don't feel like making it though. Or maybe I made it. I don't know. Did I? Probably not. I don't know. I'm just gonna keep eating my blizzard.
Chase, thank you for making us feel badly that you have a blizzard and we don't, but don't worry about that.
Called it like 15 minutes ago. I saw the red spoon and I said, "Is that a blizzard?" And
Yeah,
he
but you
showed
noticed he
it.
didn't want to answer you. He didn't want to.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's for me to know and you to find out. But I put in the chat, Chase. I don't know if you ever heard of Isaac Asimov's The Foundation trilogy, and he came up with a type of profession called the psychohistorian, where they literally looked at fairly massive trends to predict this galactic empire's fall. But they had these mathematical equations that also, even though they were they did not want to overstate what they were able to do, but when they applied it to individual people, obviously the idiosyncratic characteristics made the probability of a certain action be a much less probability. But yeah, but that's what I thought about when you were talking.
That reminds me, I need to see the Dune movie. I read the book a really long time ago.
Oh,
And I remember some stuff, but not a lot. But I need to read. I'm kind of curious. I wonder, okay, so
yeah, that's a good
what is
point.
accurate about Dune now? Is it like about resources and yeah, I'm curious about that.
Okay, so just because I'm a huge Frank Herbert nerd and I've probably read the entire trilogy, the whole point that Herbert was trying to say was the political machine of imperialism, no matter where you go, will breed villains. So even the heroes of Atreides become, at best, when they start cultivating Dune for the spice melange, worse than the Harkonnen or the Emperor could ever become later on in the series. Like, there are no good guys in Dune. Everything inevitably self-destructs. There is sustainability and insustainability in Dune, and that's what it focuses on. The destructive power of consumption and imperialism destroys everything in its wake.
But also think of the role, and I'm going to mispronounce.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Spoilers.
Oh, well, I read the book, all three of them, the first three, Dune books that Herbert actually wrote, not his son, from notes.
They're not bad. They're not
No,
bad.
but what I was
really
going to say, the women, how do you pronounce the name?
Bene Gesserit.
Gesserit. I mean, you want to talk people taking responsibility onto themselves. Yeah, we're going to try to create channels, paths, by manipulating not only individual persons, but literally cultures, right?
To make the Kwisatz Haderach.
or come close. I mean, but remember,
they did. They did, just
that,
not the way they intended. So.
Well, no, of course not, because she was supposed to give birth to a daughter, not a son.
Yes, who was actually the grandchild of the Baron Harkonnen raping one of the Bene Gesserits. We find out later in the series.
Yes, you do. Yeah. Well,
sorry.
Well, actually, though, remember, Paul actually tells his mother that she's the She's a Harkonnen.
Yeah, that's the big reveal I'm waiting for. Because like she, and then the daughter she has while drinking the spice melange remembers all of her former lives, including the fact that this is her grandfather. So I love when she meets him with the Chris knife and is like, "Hello, grandfather," and he's like, "Well, this isn't good."
But anyway, but you focused on, and I understand, on the imperialistic, right? This drive for power. But the Bene Gesserit, to me, are the most insidious out of any one group, right? Because you can kind of understand in terms of human history, why did Alexander the Great want to conquer the world? Dude, I'm conquering the world. Why is there a why? Everybody wants to conquer the world, right? It's this impulse, and I don't have an ideology, but this is going to be great. We build cities, and everything's going to be wonderful. And but that group, in terms of literally manipulating history, to me is a bit different. And look at what if you were Paul? It seems to me he was faced with a zero-sum game. Either he was going to have to challenge the emperor, or he was going to be dead, right? Because of the Harkonnens and connection with the imperial house. There wasn't a middle ground for him.
So switching topics, you should all watch Devs on Hulu.
I watched I think the first 4 or 5 episodes. I can't remember. I watched some of that. I didn't watch the end though. Which I felt like it was all gearing up to something, but
yeah, get a big hint. Devs. Someone pointed out that DEVS, that in ancient Roman script the V is a U, so Deus.
oh, wait a minute. Yeah. Oh, okay, I guess that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to go back to the topic of Dune, I downloaded Dune from a torrent, and my
For God's sakes, I'll give you my HBO Max password, man. It's on streaming.
Yeah, so my VPN, it ran out of data in the middle of it. So then it alerted the internet company or whatever, I don't know, that I was basically downloading Dune. So then they emailed my mom and like, you're downloading illegal torrents or whatever. And yeah, thanks a lot, Dune and
It's
VPNs that have very little data.
I don't really think it's Dune's fault that your mother was hassled by a corporation. I mean,
yeah.
You should have given mom a heads up too that you were doing something illegal. But
actually, she knows. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm usually just like, oh, sorry, but yeah, that was, I know it was this one. It won't happen again. It's actually happened probably like 3 times or so, but it's spaced apart enough that no kind of consequences happen anyways. I mean, do people still actually, I remember there's a time when people were actually getting sued, just like 16-year-olds for downloading something. I don't even know.
Yeah, but, that happens when you don't have an encrypted P2P connection, and not that I would ever encourage on a recorded live stream or anything of that nature or pirating. But the link I sent you, Plex, has some excellent video streaming capabilities where you can put in the name of the show and it will completely and legally obtain them for you in a BitTorrented script without having to worry about any tracking for privacy's sake.
So were you trying to get the newest Dune, or you're trying to get the older ones? Because I saw the 2 older Dunes, and I was very angry at the movie that came out in the 1980s. Kyle MacLachlan, whatever that idiot's name is, had the charisma of a mashed potato sandwich, and it was terrible casting. And they created scenes that didn't exist in the book, and then didn't show you scenes that were in the book. And it was like dragging an anchor across the desert. I mean, I hated it. And then the one I saw with William Hurt. William Hurt was a very fine actor, but the casting didn't work. I thought the people they picked for the different roles they had. I don't know if the people who picked the actors and actresses actually ever read the novel.
Yeah, so that's the David Lynch Dune, I think you're referring to, which is, yeah, it's kind of universally recognized as a terrible movie. And even so, I'm a diehard Lynch fan, and I think it's terrible too. Although it's kind of fun in like a quirky 80s way, you know, which is bad, but bad in a good way. Or
it just sucks. It's bad in a bad way. They have a scene where Gurney Halleck is running into battle with that idiot family dog strapped to his chest. Tell me
okay.
What person trained military?
That wasn't Patrick's fault.
Oh, I'm not blaming Patrick Stewart. He got handed a pile of crap and he ran with it. I'm saying, but whatever the director thought that was a good idea, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He should be forced to direct children
or the
plays in
heart thing
in Dubuque.
Yes. I never understood the heart thing with the Baron Harkonnen. Like, where did that come from? That was never in the book.
It was totally made up. Look, he was
What is this?
Okay?
Yeah.
He didn't unplug people, and so they died of a blood loss. That was just gross. That was you know, it's like, no. You know, you wanted Baron Harkonnen, they should have picked Orson Welles. When like the year that he the Man for All Seasons, when he played Cardinal Wolsey. He would have been perfect as the Baron Harkonnen.
That was the one I saw first, and I was kind of like, I wish I'd not seen that one first, because it was like, I would have been more enjoyable to watch the new one without like having known. It just seemed, because you know, like that one just tells you everything that's happening all the time, you know, from the start. And there's no real mystery.
Yeah.
And I also it wasn't until the new Dune that I had any idea how the shield things on them work, because I was like, what are all these squares? What's happening?
Yeah.
And that's why they don't have lasers, because if they use a laser on a shield, it literally it causes a small nuclear detonation.
Yeah.
One thing about the shield in the new movie was always like, you know, they do the whole slowing down thing. I was like, these guys are not slowing down your blades. I can see them when they're fighting though, like Jason Momoa. Like, he's not slowing down blades at all. They're just fine. You know,
how cool were the Sardaukar with their like raw, like vocal style fighting method? Like, they only had a small scene, but if you see the unedited, you get to see the Sardaukar practicing in kind of like a capoeira style with their fighting method with the synthesized music. So I was like, that's pretty neat.
I think that funny with Jason Momoa was like, I know it was them because, you know, when you fight them, you know, and I was like, you completely kicked their asses, dude. You only got hurt because one of them shot you with that thing. Like, you killed them so easily.
Yeah. All right, Chase, I have to know, what type of blizzard do you go for? Because you strike me as a Heath bar man.
Wait, which one did you predict?
Heath.
Oh no.
Oh no.
God,
no.
Okay, so I usually, for a long time, I was a pumpkin pie man.
Pumpkin pie. All right.
I love anything pumpkin spice. I love it. I don't know.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree with Nevin.
So I was born the day after Halloween, November 1st. I don't know. So I have a special connection with these fall themes. Maybe. Either way, I love anything pumpkin. Everything pumpkin is amazing to me. Although for blizzards, they ran out of the pumpkin spice. So then I think there's one just kind of randomly selected for me. it ended up being New York cheesecake, and it was actually delicious. And that's the one I get now. It's better than the pumpkin pie one. So, yeah.
They got rid of the Rolos and they got rid of my other favorite, which was the toast, the iced animal cracker one. The iced animal cracker one was just amazing. Probably for the best.
Oh yeah. And I've had the snickerdoodle one. Which, okay, probably one of my favorite words is snickerdoodle. Seriously, amazing word. I mean, I should get that like tattooed on my forehead, like
What is a
SoundCloud
wine
rapper
mom?
style or something. But
Maybe some wine
that
mom.
one's no, I'm not.
What is a wine mom? Is that like I don't know what this is.
Yeah, but that one was okay. I'll say it's okay, but not my thing. Yeah, New York cheesecake. That one's bomb. It's great. Much better than David Lynch's Dune. I need to watch that Jodorowsky documentary though.
Oh, it's good. I mean, it's just kind of depressing that we never got to see it because it's trippy as balls, man. It would have been amazing.
What documentary are you referring to?
I think it's just called Jodorowsky's Dune.
Yeah.
Is that it? Yeah.
Oh, the visuals and the
Jodorowsky,
art.
he's a interesting guy. I wrote a paper on the Holy Mountain, which if you haven't seen that, it's pretty amazing.
I love the fact that you know that film exists and that you call it amazing.
Yeah, I've written a paper on it. Yeah.
I've never seen it sober or not. Well, I'm sorry, I've never seen it without it being influenced.
Yeah, I think I have, but that's because, well, let's see, this is going up on my YouTube.
Yeah, I should probably be careful with what I say. I was like,
yeah.
Wait,
yeah, it's
so
all good.
was this so there was a person who was trying to make Dune, and this was about his attempt, but it didn't pan out?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
not enough mass appeal.
Really.
Well, look at it. Look what sci-fi thing captured America's imagination. It's the Star Wars crap. And, people, why do you think fast food is so popular in the United States? People want a cheeseburger and fries, and they may not want to pay a little bit more for a good meal. So I just thought the timing was really bad, and that you just didn't have the right people pushing. Because Star Wars, look at the first Star Wars movie. I mean, that's, it's fun, but it's an inch deep.
The hero's journey.
Oddly
Thank
enough,
Joseph Campbell.
yeah,
Yeah.
the
But
biggest one.
basically, it's more connected to the serials from the 1930s, the Buck Rogers. Kid, I've been from one end of this galaxy to another, and I've never seen anything that looks like the Force. I mean, come on. That line from Han Solo in the first movie could have been written in the 1930s.
Well, a lot of people have made the comment that it's a space western, and I mean, it really is. It's a space western. So,
Okay, Firefly is a space western. I don't know
Firefly,
Star Wars being, yeah.
Firefly.
I love
I worship at the altar of Firefly.
They're not worthy.
So I've had that recommended to me before, and I think I tried to watch one episode and I just wasn't feeling it for some reason.
Did you watch the pilot, the first one, the hour and a half?
I think that was it. I
Yeah.
really can't remember. I remember I think it was something about just like the whole idea of a space western to me, I was not feeling at the time. That's kind of what I remember.
You know what
But that's
movie?
no judgment on it because I didn't really watch it. So, yeah.
A movie I have not watched because the thesis just doesn't. Cowboys and Aliens. Really? I don't know. Maybe it's a great movie, but the title, I just can't. Cowboys and Aliens.
That film.
What's
My
that?
My dad loves that film.
They
I
had
think
such
it's only
star
fair.
power in that, and it was just so god awful bad. It wasn't even like good bad. It was just like Batman and Robin bad, just bad.
I'll tell you the best movie title that at least I think it's my favorite all-time movie title is, and there really is a movie called this, Nude Nuns with Big Guns.
Wait.
It's such a fabulous title that my wife and I tried to watch it, and like it's on Netflix, and like 15 minutes into it, we're like, oh my God, we cannot watch any more of this. But it is the best title, Nude Nuns with Big Guns. I mean, what better title is there than that?
I like it. I like it. What was the name of that? Okay, Nevin, you were telling us a while ago about this movie you watched. Was it called Butt Boy?
But boy,
Yeah, that
Actually, pretty good.
I still need to watch that one.
It's actually pretty good.
it's hilarious.
So
Ripley,
the
is
way
that
you were
your?
describing it, it actually kind of sounds like Deleuze and Guattari's idea of the body without organs to a certain
really?
degree. Actually, I should probably watch that. I mean, I'm kind of doing my thesis on that, so it's research, right? I gotta watch Butt Boy for thesis research.
There you go. I mean, the best thing about the movie is that they play it absolutely straight. It is
Yeah.
completely straight.
Nice.
Deadpan.
It is totally ridiculous.
I apologize, Ripley. If that film's your dad's favorite, I don't mean to knock on it. I mean, everybody likes different things. So,
I don't think it's his favorite. He liked it.
okay.
Well,
apologize.
maybe it's great. I haven't watched it because it's just the title and the whole idea, aliens and cowboys. I'm like, oh, I just can't watch that.
Okay, so
maybe it's a great film.
Okay, so speaking of aliens, okay, Cowboys and Aliens is a ripoff of Aliens in the Wild Wild West, which is the real original, and it is an amazing classic film. Everyone should go watch it. I think you can only buy it on VHS because I think okay, so I saw it something I don't know how long ago, a while ago. I think it was on HBO, and it's just the most ridiculous B movie you could possibly just okay.
Oh, I think
Okay, look up
that's
a Google image search and just type in
yeah.
aliens of the Wild West. Look at the images, look at the alien costume. It's like a Muppet suit that somebody would wear in Disneyland or something like that. It's just like a big like furry suit, and then it goes around and just like talks in a high-pitched voice and is an alien, and it makes no sense at all. It's just a UFO shows up and crashes, and people and these teenagers travel back in time with no explanation, and they just they try to help this alien, and nothing makes sense, and it's great. I highly recommend it.
See, I enjoyed that, but I think under the same lines, Bad Taste would be a better one to start off with if you want some really good cheese by Academy Award winning director Peter Jackson. I stress Academy Award winning.
Wait, what film?
Bad Taste.
Just Bad Taste?
Or Dead Alive. Also a very excellent film, Dead Alive by Academy Award winning director Peter Jackson.
Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
For a second, I mixed him up with the guy who did Battleship, and it was like, he won an award.
Yes. Well, I've enjoyed this conversation immensely. So this has been a fun evening. I appreciate you all.
Yeah. Thanks for the relief from the world.
Yeah, no, it was excellent. This is good. I
World
needed this.
sucks. Okay.
I think
Well,
we
we'll
need to have a
see.
movie night again.
Yes, I agree with that 100%.
Maybe after the
Okay.
semester.
Looks like people are defecting.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see you Monday. Hopefully, only one more meeting on this, and so we need to figure out what we're going to do at some point. So, anyway, Bye-bye.
We're still doing this though, right? We're
Bye-bye.
not ending this, or we're continuing on.
There seem to be enough people interested in doing something over the summer that we'll probably do something. You know, if there's enough people, we can do both literature and philosophy, and there seem to be enough people that were interested. So yeah, my assumption is we'll keep doing both.
Let's do
Good.
Spinoza.
Woohoo!
Yes. All
Well,
right.
I need to read it. So yeah.
Me too. Night
You
night.
too. Night.
All right.